Hello, my name's Katie. Welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'm gonna be ranking the foundations that I tried in 2017 and telling you my least to most favourite foundations of last year. So in order to do this, I basically retried all of them and I have clips filmed of me trying all of them on and what they look like just on their own and then with the rest of my makeup done. So obviously I will play them as I'm talking through the different foundations. So in total there are 15 foundations on this list. There were a few foundations that I did try throughout the year that I threw away for various reasons and therefore I couldn't retry them, so I just didn't see the point in including them on this. There was an MUA foundation which was really fucking orange on me, and there was two Essence foundations which were really orange on me, and I also think they might have been discontinued as well. And then there was a Beauty UK one which was really orange on me. So the formulas they were okay, they weren't dreadful, but they just weren't enough for me to overlook how orange they were. So yeah, those foundations you might have seen in some videos, but I'm not going to include them in this list. But there are 15 foundations in total that I tried this year that I have ranked. Overall, it's been a pretty good year for foundation. I would say the vast majority of things in this list I like. There's probably like one foundation, to be honest, I don't like. And a couple that I'm like a bit like meh, they're not the best, but they're not terrible either. And then everything else I really like, you know, it's been a pretty good year for foundations, to be honest. So I'm just doing this video for foundations. I was gonna do a similar kind of video for concealers, but to be honest, I just can't be bothered. Let's just be real here. So I'm just gonna do like a 2017 makeup favorites video. I know this is like really late, everyone's done these already, but I don't care, you know, like I've got work and things and general mental health stuff, so I'm never gonna be on point with my uploads. Yeah, I will do a makeup favorites video that's going to have basically all the makeup ever with the exception of foundations, because that's what this video is for. And my makeup area is a mess, so I'm going to have fun finding all these. So I've ranked all of the foundations on the 3 categories. I've got coverage, I've got finish, and I've got longevity, and they're all out of 5. So in total they'll have a rating out of 15. Obviously some of these foundations had like the same number ratings, so then I just kind of had to pick my own preferences based on, you know, what I liked about them. Some of the foundations, it was kind of hard for me to really pick which one was better than the other because some of them are quite similar. I do have a few notes, but I didn't make a lot of notes, so hopefully I actually remember how these foundations looked. If not, I'm just going to have to watch the clips back. Okay, so number 15, this is my least favourite foundation of the year. This is the H&M Natural Satin Foundation. It says on the bottle, sheer coverage, dewy finish, and this is in the shade Alabaster. That is what it looks like. This is my least favourite foundation of the year. For coverage, I gave it a 2 out of 5. For finish, I also gave it a 2 out of 5. And for longevity, I gave it 3 out of 5. So in my original first impressions, which was the August first impressions video, I did say that initially I quite liked it, it was alright. I mean, it definitely wasn't good coverage or anything, but I liked the finish at the time, but I didn't wear it very often after that video, and then I just think there was one time, maybe a month or so later, where I wore it, and I just looked at it and I was like, this doesn't actually look that good. Like, it just looks really textured, the coverage is just not great. But like, the thing is, I think like sheer coverage foundations or like BB creams can work. It just all depends on kind of like the finish and like the kind of how it looks on the skin. So I don't think like sheer coverage is necessarily like a no-go for me. It's just like if it's then like got a really kind of textured finish, it just makes it all look worse. And that's what I kind of feel of this. So in the clip I made it really white. I put way too much white mixer in. I don't know if you'll be able to see on camera how kind of like textured and just not very nice on my skin it looks. I think actually adding the white mixer kind of made it look a bit better than it would look on its own or with like less white mixer. But yeah, when you use a smaller amount of white mixer and or just use it on its own, it's even worse looking in my opinion. It's not terrible, like I would wear it out, it's just not something that I really want to reach for. It's also really overpriced. I think it was $10.99, and I think for like a drugstore foundation it's got to be pretty good if it's that price, and it's just not. So yeah, obviously if I gave it 2 out of 5 for coverage. Coverage is just not very good. The finish I also gave 2 out of 5 because I don't like the finish. It just looks really textured, and it just doesn't flatter my skin in my opinion. But I gave it 3 out of 5 for coverage. I did give it 3 out of 5 for longevity because I mean it didn't look too dissimilar to what it looked like when I first put it on, so I didn't really want to knock it too much in longevity because it wasn't like terrible wear wise. So yeah, that's my number 15 foundation. It's really the only foundation on this list that I just don't like. The overall rating I gave that foundation was a 7 out of 15 based on those 3 categories. From this point onwards, everything I think has good aspects to it. The next couple aren't my favourite foundations, but I think that they're not bad, they're okay. Number 14 is the Freedom Pro Matte Longwear Foundation in shade Matte 02. That's what that one looks like. And for this foundation I gave it a 2.5 out of 5 for coverage, I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 for finish, and I gave it a 3 out of 5 for longevity, so overall it's got a 9 out of 15 rating. And I don't think this is a bad foundation by any means. I think my main issue with this is it does look quite greasy and oily on the skin, and it's not the best coverage either. I would prefer something with a little bit more coverage. Those are my main kind of issues with it. I think it lasts reasonably well. I actually quite like the finish in terms of it doesn't really look textured and it looks quite natural on the skin. But obviously it's just that kind of greasy oiliness that I'm not the biggest fan of. I mean, as you'll see in the clips, when I like set it with powder, it does take that away quite a bit. But I don't know, I just still find it a bit off-putting when it's like, I don't mind a little bit of dewiness and stuff, but I think this just takes it a little bit too far. I still don't think it's a bad foundation. The coverage is definitely better than the H&M one, but it's not the best coverage. I mean, I gave it the highest rating on finish because I do like the finish. I don't think it looks textured or anything. It looks nice on the skin. It doesn't look bad at all. And it weared pretty well. It didn't wear amazingly, but it didn't wear badly either. The colour match of this one's pretty good as well. I would say it's maybe a little bit dark, a little bit orangey, but I feel like I can get away wearing this one on its own. I don't really need a white mixer with it. So yeah, overall this is an okay foundation. It's just not something that I reach for a lot. It is £2 as well, and I think for that price it's really good. I think this is like handy if like I'm doing like a themed video where I'm wanting to use really cheap makeup, like I used it in my £20 makeup challenge. And I don't know, if I ever do something in the future where I want to use like cheap makeup, like a dupes video or whatever, I think this is a handy thing to kind of keep around. So the next 4 foundations all have the same rating. They've all got a 10 out of 15, so it's a little bit more difficult for me to kind of order these. I still don't even know if I've got this 100% right. I've just kind of gone on my first instincts here. Number 13 is the L'Oreal Infallible Stay Fresh Foundation 24 Hour, and mine is in the shade Porcelain, and that's what it looks like. Again, I think this is one of these foundations that I really liked upon first impression, and I still do really like it. It's definitely not a bad foundation at all. Coverage, I gave it a 3.5 out of 5. For finish, I gave it a 3 out of 5. And for longevity, I gave it a 3.5 out of 5. And therefore, I've given it a 10 out of 15 overall. My notes here, I've put that it looks a bit textured on the skin, and it doesn't look super natural. So yeah, I think that was my kind of main issue with this, is it's not the most flattering on the skin. It said here that the coverage is decent. It has got decent coverage, not the best, but it's definitely got some coverage to it. I've put here that it's not as good as remembered, because I just seem to remember liking this a lot when I first used it, and obviously I kind of stopped using it as much because I was trying other foundations. And I don't know, I think maybe just as I've tried more foundations, I just think it doesn't hold up as well compared to them. But it's not a bad foundation at all. The shade is a little bit off for me. It's a little bit pinky when I'd prefer it to be more yellowy. And I do need a white mix with this, otherwise it does kind of oxidize and look a little bit off. But it's not a terrible colour. I was like kind of debating whether I like this one and the next foundation I'm going to mention more. As I did a couple days ago, I did like a half on one side of my face and half on the other because I just wanted to see which one I preferred, and I still decided to go with this one for the least for the reasons I'll explain when I mention the next foundation. For number 12, I've gone with the Lottie London Selfie Ready Medium Coverage Matte Foundation. Mine's in the shade Ivory, and that's what it looks like here. I haven't got the lid on it. Really like the packaging of this one, actually. This one I was like having a long debate on whether I liked this more than the L'Oreal one or not, but in the end I decided I did like it a bit more than the L'Oreal one. I think mainly because it just had a bit of a smoother finish in the skin and it didn't look quite as textured. So I think that's why in the end I rated it a bit more, and I also think it wore a little bit nicer. So for coverage I gave it a 3 out of 5, for finish I gave it a 3.25 out of 5, and for longevity I gave it a 3.75 out of 5. So in my notes all I've really written for criticism is that the coverage could be stronger, and to be honest that's really all I can think of as well. Yeah, it just could be better coverage, and I don't know, it just doesn't wow me compared to some of the higher ranked foundations here. It's obviously pretty decent. The coverage is okay, could be better. Finish I given it a 3.25, so yeah, I think it looked quite smooth and nice on the skin, but it just wasn't my favourite finish. And longevity I gave it a 3.75, so I think, yeah, I do remember this one wearing a bit better than some of the other foundations I'm gonna have and will mention. Again, the colour of this is a bit off and I do need a white mix with this, but overall it's not a bad foundation. That one also got a 10 out of 15 overall. So number 11 is the Rimmel BB Cream in the shade Very Light, and that's what that one looks like. Does my camera even focus on these things? I don't know. So for coverage I gave this a 2.5 out of 5, for finish I gave it a 4 out of 5, for longevity I gave it a 3.5 out of 5, so overall it's got a 10 out of 15 rating. This is obviously BB cream, so BB creams are never going to have the best coverage, but honestly I think the coverage is not bad. I think it's a bit better than some of the foundations I've already mentioned, but I mean it's a BB cream, so at the end of the day if you're looking for strong coverage from a BB cream you're going to be disappointed. I gave it a 4 out of 5 for finish because I do remember this looks quite nice. It looks quite dewy but not like too greasy and oily like the Freedom one. It looks quite nice in the skin, quite natural, not textured. So yeah, that's obviously why I've given this one a 4 out of 5 because it does look quite nice in the skin. The colour of this one, even though it's a shade Very Light, it's a little bit off. I think it kind of depends what products you pair it with, because in the clip that you'll see, I remember looking a little bit like orange on the day, but then I've worn it a couple days ago and I didn't have that problem. So I think it all kind of depends on like the concealers and the powders you use with it. And obviously BB creams I find like tend to kind of adapt to your skin a bit more than like regular foundations, so the colour's not too much of an issue. If you put some concealer on and set it with powder, I think you get pretty good wear with this. So overall I do quite like this. Obviously it's something that I go for in more kind of natural days, but yeah, I think this is pretty decent for a BB cream. That one also got a 10 out of 15. So number 10 is this thing. I don't know the proper name of this because I got it off of Amazon ages ago. It was one of my choices for my Amazon full face video. On the bottle it says Makeup Professional Colour Correction Foundation and it says Leiku underneath it. I think on Amazon it was advertised as like Jane Dream, and then it had like foundation, BB cream, loads of things listed. That's what it looks like there. I think it was in the shade like Ivory White or Ivory Light or something like that. I'll leave a link to it below if I can still find it. Yeah, I think this is supposed to be more of a BB cream, and it definitely seems that way. It is more of a lighter coverage foundation, BB cream, I'm not sure what to call it really. So for coverage I've given it a 2.5 out of 5, for finish I've given it a 4 out of 5, and for longevity I've given it a 3.5 out of 5. I think I have the exact same ratings for the Rimmel one, but for some reason I've gone for this one as higher. I've written here that the coverage is not great, but it is buildable, and I think that may be one of the reasons why I like it slightly more than the Rimmel, is that the coverage is buildable. I said that it gives a nice natural dewy finish, which is definitely true, And I also put here that it wears better than expected. Yeah, I definitely think so. I feel like I initially thought that it wouldn't wear very good, but then it wore okay. So yeah, it does wear pretty decently. Obviously I've given it a 4 out of 5 for coverage because it does look quite nice and natural skin. It's actually the one I've got on today, I think. Yeah, it looks pretty nice. I mean, it's come off all of my nose area, just ignore that, that's because I touch my nose all the time. But yeah, I actually think that it does look pretty nice. The colour of it is ridiculously pale, but I feel like if you use like slightly deeper concealers and powders, it looks fine. It doesn't make you look really washed out. Like I feel like colouring wise, I feel like I look okay. It's not much of an issue, but it's always nice when you do find something that is too pale. Yeah, I'm not really sure what it is about this that makes me like it more than the Rimmel one. I think it just has a bit of a nice finish. I just think I just like the look of it a little bit more, and it feels a bit fresher as well. So obviously that one got a 10 out of 15 as well. So number 9 is the B Flawless Silk Foundation. It's in the shade N1. That's what it looks like. So for coverage, I've given this one a 3.5 out of 5. For finish, I've given it a 3.5 out of 5. And for longevity, I gave it a 3.25 out of 5. So overall, it's got a 10.25 out of 15. Right here that it wears well till about 6 hours, and that's when it starts to break down quite bad. But the overall longevity isn't too bad. So yeah, I think it wears well up until a certain point, and then it really does start to break down. I've put here that it's got a more natural finish and it doesn't look really cakey or anything. I know when I was watching the clips back, because I have edited some of them before filming this, that it didn't look quite as good coverage as I remembered it looking when I did retry it. So I don't know if I would maybe knock down the coverage a bit, make it free, but I've already done the list, I can't be bothered to change it now. But it's a nice foundation, it looks pretty good in the skin, looks pretty natural, doesn't look textured or anything. It's a nice foundation. I think my issue with this is that it could be better coverage. Again, it's just not really got that wow factor or anything. Colour of this, I think I used it on its own in the video clips, I'm not sure, I actually can't remember. Colour's a little bit off, it does need a bit of a white mixer with it, it does oxidise. For number 8, I've gone with the Bourjois 123 Perfect Foundation, and I believe it's the shade Light Vanilla, what that one looks like. So for coverage, I've given this a 3.5 out of 5. For finish, I've given it a 3.5 out of 5. And for longevity, I gave it a 3.25 out of 5. Yeah, so I think I gave it a similar rating to the B one, but I do like this one slightly more than the B one. I think it's got nicer coverage and just looks a bit nicer on the skin. All I've written for my notes is nice finish, medium coverage, that's okay. So that's really helpful. Yeah, no, I do actually really like the way this one looks on the skin. I remember really liking it in my first impressions. This is one of the earlier foundations I bought. I think it was in my January first impressions I got this. So I've had it a while. My main issue with this is the colour. This is probably the darkest foundation that's in this list. It needs a lot of white mixture for it to work, but I think that it looks pretty good. It's a nice foundation. Even though the shade's off, it does have quite a yellowy tone, which I do appreciate as the more yellowy toned person. Just wish it was paler, and that is the lightest shade. And overall, that one got a 10.25 out of 15 as well. And for number 7, I've gone with the New Look No Shine Mattifying Foundation. This one's in the shade Porcelain. Coverage, I've given it a 3.5 out of 5. For finish, I've also given it a 3.5 out of 5. For longevity, I've also given it a 3.5 out of 5. Overall, it's got a 10.5 out of 15 rating. I put here 8 hours plus, wears well, goes textured, breaks down slightly, but overall wears pretty good. So yeah, overall wears pretty good, but obviously I feel like with most foundations, things will start to just break down after a certain point. I really like the colour of this foundation. I don't really need a white mixer with it. It's a really good colour for me. It's got pretty good coverage and it's got a nice finish and it lasts pretty well. I think when I was watching some of the clips back, it did look a little bit more textured on the skin than I remember it looking, but I don't know. I don't always trust the camera, to be honest. But yeah, this is a pretty good foundation. I like it. I do reach for this one quite a bit. So for number 6, I've gone for the Milani Conceal and Perfect 2-in-1 Foundation and Concealer, and it's in the shade 00A Porcelain. I think this is one of the kind of last foundations I tried. It was in my December's first impressions. It's the lightest shade, but I do find that I need a white mixer with it because it does oxidize a bit. But with a bit of white mixer, it's a pretty good colour. For coverage, I've given it a 3.75 out of 5. For finish, I've given it a 3.75 out of 5. For longevity, I've given it a 3.75 out of 5. So overall, it's got an 11.25 out of 15 rating. I just remember this looking really nice in the skin, giving pretty good coverage and having a really nice finish and not looking textured, not looking cakey. I just remember this being a really nice foundation. Hopefully it can be seen in the clips. Yeah, this is pretty good. I like it. Next 5 foundations I'm going to talk about are my favourites of the year. I really like everything at this point. So the next thing at number 5 is the NYX Total Control Drop Foundation. Mine's in the shade Alabaster. I think one of my issues with this foundation is that it's pretty expensive for what it is. I think it's £14 and you don't really get that much product, to be honest. Like, it's a pretty tiny bowl. I just feel like they could make it more product for it to kind of justify that price a bit more, but it's a really good foundation. For coverage, I've given it a 3.5 out of 5. For finish, I've given it a 4.5 out of 5. Longevity, I've given it a 3.5 out of 5. So overall, it's got an 11.5 out of 15. And I've wrote here that I love the finish, because it's true. It looks amazing on the skin. It looks so natural, so nice. It doesn't look too matte, but it doesn't look too dewy either. It just looks really nice on the skin. I just love how this one looks. The dropper thing I find a bit inconvenient though. It does take a long time to kind of build up around your face, but you might be able to see in the clips it's a little bit longer than the rest of the clips. But yeah, it's just a really nice foundation. It lasts pretty well. The coverage is definitely buildable, and I think it all just depends on how much patience I've got, because you know, you can build this up so it is like a almost full coverage, but obviously it just takes a while to build up and it's a bit of an inconvenience. But it's just such a nice foundation. I love how this looks in the skin. It's really good. Definitely deserves to be one of the faves of the year. And the next foundation is the Tarte Rainforest of the Sea Water Foundation, and I do have like a first impressions review of this foundation up in my channel. You can find it. Just look, it wasn't that far back. For coverage, I've given this a 3.5 out of 5. For finish, I've given it a 4.5 out of 5. For longevity, I've given it a 3.5 out of 5. Overall, it's got an 11.5. I think it's the exact same ratings as the NYX one. They are very similar foundations, I find. The colour of this is literally perfect. It is the most accurate skin match I've ever had. That always just makes the foundation experience much nicer when it's like a perfect colour. The finish of this is beautiful. It looks so natural on the skin. It doesn't look textured at all. I just love the way that this looks on the skin. It just looks amazing. It's not like full coverage by any means. It can be built up, but it's definitely not full coverage, which I guess is why I would knock some marks off it. Not the best wear of all the foundations on this list, but it lasts pretty well. And yeah, I love this foundation. I honestly think it's amazing. And the number 3 foundation is the Urban Decay All Nighter Waterproof Longwear Liquid Foundation. Mine is in 0.5, the lightest shade of course. That's what it looks like. The shade of this I feel like initially is a pretty good match, but it definitely oxidizes, so I always use a white mixer with this. It oxidizes like a bitch. Coverage, I've given it a 4.5 out of 5. For finish, I've given it a 4 out of 5. And for longevity, I've given it a 3.5 out of 5. Right here that it lasts pretty well, but does break down worse than I remembered. Yeah, this is obviously called an all-night foundation, and it's talked about as being a really long-wearing foundation. And I seem to remember initially finding it quite long-wearing, but when I wore it for this wear test, it didn't wear as nice as I thought it was going to, so I had to knock it down a little bit there. Another issue I have with this is that it does look quite dry in the skin. It's not really bad or anything, but I think if you had dry skin, this foundation probably wouldn't work for you. I personally do like how it looks on my skin. It looks pretty flawless. The coverage is amazing. It's got such good coverage. I do really like how this foundation looks on the skin. The only issue really I have is that it does look slightly dry in areas like under the eyes. I guess that just depends on your preferences if you're really anti-dryness. For me, it's not too much of an issue. It's a pretty great foundation. It's something I reach for a lot. I really like it. Okay, so we're on number 2 now, so this is the runner-up. Decided to go for the Dermacol Makeup Cover foundation. This one is in the shade 208. That's what it looks like, the nice glittery bottle. Now in the clips that I'm going to show you, I don't know if I'm going to include the bit where I explain it, I had a bit of an issue with powder with this foundation. I just used the wrong techniques and the wrong powders, so it doesn't look as nice and flawless as it has the potential to. The colour of this is a little bit off. I do need a white mixer with it as well, but it is amazing. Coverage, I've given it a 5 out of 5. Finish, I've given it a 4 out of 5. Longevity, I've given it a 3 out of 5. And overall it's got a 12 out of 15. I was prepared to kind of rate this a bit lower because I thought that it would wear like really badly, but I've worn it for the clips I've shown you, and I've worn it since, and actually it wears a lot better than I expected it would. I thought it was going to wear terribly, but it's definitely not the best wearing foundation ever, but it wears pretty well. Kind of has the opposite problem of the Urban Decay one, in that it looks quite greasy and oily on the skin as opposed to the Urban Decay one that looks really dry. Yeah, if you've got super oily skin, I don't think this would work for you, but honestly if you set it with powder it's not much of an issue for me personally. I just think it looks so flawless. Like the coverage, obviously I've given it 5 because it's... Hello. My cat's just come in. I've given it a 5 because it's just amazing. It's the best coverage foundation I've ever... Are you okay? Meow. Meow. Can you not see I'm filming? Shh. Oh, for fuck's sake. Just had to have a quick break to pet my cat, and she's not happy with me, so I'm not paying enough attention to her. Yeah, this just looks amazing. I mean, I just think it looks flawless. It's beautiful. Lasts better than I expected. It could last better. And the finish is pretty nice. It's just quite greasy in texture, but that's not a huge issue for me. So this one gets my number 2 spot. I love it. It's a great foundation. So we're finally at number 1. This was my favourite foundation of the year. And this goes to the Kat Von D Lock-It foundation, and mine is in the shade Light 42. This foundation actually is a little bit too light for me. It's also a little bit pinky. I'd prefer it to be more neutral to yellow. But I feel like, again, once you put it on the skin, you've set it with powder and you've got your concealers on, it doesn't really look completely off or anything. It looks fine. Colour's not that much of an issue. Coverage, I've given it a 4.5 out of 5. Finish, I've given it a 4 out of 5. Longevity, I've given it a 4 out of 5. So overall, it gets a 12.5 out of 5. I do find it similar to the Urban Decay one in that it does look slightly dry in some areas, but I don't think it's as bad as the Urban Decay one. It's not really that noticeable at all. Obviously if you've got dry skin it probably would emphasise that a lot more, but on me personally it doesn't look that bad. I personally think it looks flawless. I just really like how this looks on my skin. I love that it's super pale. Obviously it's a bit too pale, but I don't know, it's just I much prefer something to be paler than darker on my skin. It lasts really well. It's probably the best wearing foundation on this list, which I guess is one of the reasons it gets the top spot. It just wears pretty well. This is probably something I'd want to wear for a long day. I mean, obviously you can tell you're wearing a foundation when you wear it. It doesn't look super natural, but honestly I don't really want foundation to look super natural all the time. This is my favourite foundation of the year. I wear all of the foundations on this list quite regularly. I switch between them all because, I mean, as I've said, I think it's been a pretty good year for foundation. I like almost all of these foundations. I think they've all got their different purposes and situations where I want to wear them for. Yeah, I feel like I'll do a better job at this video next year because I'm going to pay a bit more attention to things. I don't know if this video is any good. I'm really not the best at like reviewing foundations because I don't know, I don't know, I'm just not great at it. I watch a lot of other YouTubers that do a much better job than me, so I don't know if I gave enough detail on these, to be honest, but hopefully you can kind of see the clips and you'll see how they look on the skin, and you can form your own opinions on them. Some people might think ones that I've ranked lower look nicer than ones I've ranked higher. Obviously I'm just going on my preferences, but you know, people might have different opinions on that. In some of the clips I've got like no eye makeup on or very little eye makeup, and that's because I had a star in my eye at a certain point during the re-filming of all these. So if that eye face just looks really weird, that's why. I just look really weird when I don't have mascara or eyeliner on, but yeah. So I hope you got something out of this video, maybe. Who knows, probably not. This is probably shit, but whatever. So I'll see you in my next video. Bye!